All right, so I'll just try to test to see if the sound's working. I think it's all running fine. Realize probably most of you over in the States and in the UK are probably asleep at the moment, but spent a lot of time yesterday trying to set up this streaming sort of setup I've got on my computer. So felt like doing a bit of sketching this afternoon here in Melbourne. There's a bit of a lockdown going on and sort of stuck indoors, so thought I'd pick a few reference photos to just practice on. I've got a couple of beach landscapes, and I've also got a couple of architectural landscapes that we'll do in line and wash. So if you've got any questions, during the stream or even afterwards, if you're just wondering what I'm up to or you have any general questions, just feel free to leave them in the comments, and got a separate computer kind of running on the side if you want to send something through. So I'm going to get started now, and I know some of you might have already seen some of these line and wash tutorials that I've done, but I'll go over just some real basics, essentially in terms of materials that I use. So this here is a sketchbook. Essentially, this is a cotton watercolor sketchbook. You can use any type of watercolor sketchbook. Some of the papers are made of cellulose, some of them are made of cotton. I'd suggest cotton. And I've got a bunch of pens here. So often people ask what kind of pens I use, when I'm drawing with line and wash. So these are just some Uniball pens, and they cost me, I think, a few dollars each. But the great thing is that they are waterproof and fade proof. So obviously when you're going over the top with your washes, it's not going to start mixing in and causing issues. So for some people that's fine. Some people do like to have inks that run a bit. So it's really up to you, depending on your style. So I'm going to show you just a really quick sketch first, just how I approach it. I'll see if I can get the photograph up on the screen. Okay. There we go. So you should be able to see a photograph just in a moment. The stream is lagging a little bit, but I'll just continue on anyhow. So over here I've got myself a 0.5 millimeter pen, and I'm just going to be using this to essentially sketch in all these little details for the reference photo here. So firstly, just start off, I'm going to get in a little square rectangle coming across, probably end it around here, and just go down. Don't need to draw the line all in one go, just something like this. There we go, little border. Okay, so what we want to do is just pop in the horizon line, so I'm just going to draw that straight across. If you look at where the water sort of starts, it's around just the middle section of the page, so I'm going to go in and pop that through like that. And I tend to also draw in broken lines as well, because that does help just to give it a more looser feel, and it makes it easier for you as well. Just move this light around, it's getting a bit, I think that looks a bit better. It's a bit glary. Okay, so what I'm going to do with this one, I'm really just going to simplify it down. We've got some water that's coming in at the back, and I'm just going to get in an indication of that, just like this, really basic. And we might want to have some figures in. There's about 4 or 5 figures near the center of the page, but I might just actually put some closer around here. So I always start with the head, bit of a few lines for the body, and the most important thing really is the legs. So you want to have one of the legs behind and one of them in front, and just keep it pretty loose. The position of the head's also quite important, so if you end up obviously having the head tilted on a kind of angle, it just makes it look like the person is facing the other person. So maybe we go like this and pop in again just the other side of the body there. And there we have it. We've got a very, very simple couple of figures walking along the beach. And I think what's always good is just adding a bit of headland in the background as well. So just over here, I'm going to scribble in a bit of land and, you know, really just referring to that reference picture pretty loosely. Okay. And that's about it. I mean, really, at this stage, you can add in all these little bits and pieces, such as, you know, you can pop in some rocks here at the bottom, little bits of seaweed or stuff like that washed up, but it's not so necessary. Just things like that. You know, maybe larger one there, like that. Okay, and I think we are ready to just get started with the painting now. So I'm going to pick up a bunch of brushes that I'll be using for this. So I've got myself a whole bunch of these flat brushes, and I tend to use flat brushes actually quite a lot in my painting, because when you're doing edges, like sharp edges like this, it just makes it a lot easier to get it in. But at the same time, I do also use round brushes and, you know, mop brushes like this. This one's way too big for this little sketch, but I do like to use those for larger areas. So I've got a little one, and that will do me fine. And just a couple of smaller detailing brushes. So I've got this one here, which is a number 4 round brush, and just a smaller flat brush here. So really, I think these 3 will be the main ones that I'll be using. I don't really use all too many brushes in my paintings, and honestly, I try to get in as much detail as I can with only a few brushes. I'm just going to play around with these settings for the camera, because there's a bit of, just keeps, the brightness keeps changing. So let me see if I can actually, I don't think I can change that. That's all right, we'll carry on. Okay, so starting off with the sky, what I'm going to do is just pick up a bit of cerulean blue. Okay, and my palette looks terrible. There's all kinds of gunk in there. But I've got a little spot here that I'm just going to reserve. Just pick up a bit of this cerulean blue. I always spray down my palette a little bit as well, so that there's just enough wetness of the paint, so then I don't have to, you know, keep scrubbing away to get a bit of paint off. So start off at the top like that, and, you know, you can even add in a bit of cobalt blue through to this mix as well. A little bit of wet in wet, and move that down the page. Really, at this point, you can decide whether you want to add in a bit of warmth at the bottom. You can also just water that down and keep it completely blue. I think what I'll do is just stick mainly to the reference photo, keep that blue in the sky, just bring that down. And at the bottom, I've got a little bit of, what is this? It's a little bit of rose madder, I think. It's a pinkish sort of red. See if I can drop a bit in just to show you. Tiny little blend like that. So something like that. Okay. Great. And finish off this bit here where it sort of touches the headland at the back. This is also a really good time to play around with those clouds, so you can drop in you know, a bit of darker paint. Just mix up a bit of grey or a bit of blue as well. And just sort of drop in a bit of that there. Like that. Just to get a little cloud shape running through the back. It's really important, if you want to do this, to just do it while the paint's still wet, so that those clouds just don't stick out all too much, like that. There we go. And let that all kind of melt in and do its thing. So now for this area of the water over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up a little bit of that red again and drop that in here at the edge of the water, and just to show that it's reflecting a bit of light off the sky. And then I'm going to go grab a bit of the blue, cerulean blue, and drop that straight in. This is going to be a slightly stronger mix to what we've used in the sky, something like this here, doing a bit of cutting around the figures as well. Okay, and maybe a bit of this darker paint running through as well there. Okay, and for the foreground here, where the figures are walking, I'm going to be using some yellow ochre. So just a little bit of that, drop that in like this. And I'm also going to leave a tiny bit of, just some areas of white near the water like this. And other areas will let kind of mix in. If you get a bit of dry brush on there, that's great, just leave it. Okay, and just carry that across. Go over the, yeah, you can go over all the rocks, even the ones at the back, this large bit of headland, because the great thing is you can leave a bit of that lighter colour when we make it darker afterwards, just to show some highlights. Okay, as we get further down to the front, I'm going to just add in a little bit of, just a little bit of darker colour, like that. Here, drag that down. Okay, and you know, sometimes what I like to do is just pick up a bit of, you know, just a bit of paint on the palette. Doesn't matter what it is. It can be a bit of brown paint like that. Can't really see what I'm doing, but just a little bit of brown paint, thicker paint, and you can tap that onto another brush to get these little sort of splatter effects here. So it's just a little thing you can do to imply some texture. It's up to you whether you want to do that or not, just something. And I'll just add a few little strokes running through as well. Like that. Okay, fantastic. At this point, we're pretty much going to let it dry. I'm going to speed up the process by using a hairdryer. It just makes things a lot faster. Okay, so that's dried off pretty quickly, and the last thing we want to do is essentially just add in all the darker areas of the painting. We've got this headland out the back, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of green, mix it in with some brown, drop that in. Let's have a look to see. So we can start off kind of around the top edge as well. Oops, if you've gone up a bit far, that's okay, just fix it up. And what I'm trying to do is I'm drying off that brush a little bit on the paper so that I can get some dry brush strokes sort of running through parts of it, like that. Here, just vary that mix a little bit, and some darker bits as well. Here starts to come down and finishes off around about here. Okay, and you know, you can add in some darker bits in there too if you want. Just at the base, I'll use my finger to sort of spread it around a bit, and you know, a little round brush here which we can now just use to put in some color for the rocks. So there's one there. Another thing we've got to start thinking about is just the light source. The great thing about these little sketches is that you learn so much from them. So if you're essentially just learning, you know, starting off in watercolors, and you're learning also how to draw, which is super important because it forms the basis of your actual painting. I think these line and wash sketches are just a fantastic way in order to sort of learn the basics. And the thing is that it forces you to learn how to draw because you kind of raise things. You have to sort of, you know, be a bit more meticulous in judging the size of objects, also, you know, in relation to each other, the perspective as well. So it's just a good place to start off with, especially, you know, if you're just learning. And shadows, we can decide where the light source will be. For example, if we just pretend the light source is coming from the left hand side, we're going to want to put some shadows running towards the right hand side, especially for these figures here. Just a little indication like that. I'm drawing that on to their legs here, there, and you know, I haven't done their shirts or anything yet. That's okay. We can just get a bit of shadow running across for these rocks and things too, like that, there, like that. You know, I'll also just like to put in a bit of color for their clothing, so just maybe some yellow for this person, and for the other one, who knows, just a bit of this funny color, don't even know what it is, a bit of grey-ish color, and a little bit also for the heads, bit of red, drop that in there. Really, if you want, you can also put in some hair. I'll just use some darker kind of color, drop that in. We can wait until afterwards. It's no big deal. At this point, when everything's dried, the great thing about watercolor is that you just have to continue to layer it, and it looks better as you add more layers. I mean, there's a certain point where it starts looking overworked, but you know, for instance, if I want to add a tree over the top of all this, I think that's almost dried. So I can pick up a very dark paint, probably some burnt umber, just a dark brown mixed with some neutral tint. And I can come in from the side here and try to get in a shape of a tree, for example, just something like this. And that will go over the top of everything else. And it's darker than these mountains, thingos, not mountains, sorry, these bits of headland in the background. And give you an extra layer of detail. So having these different combinations of tones really helps to make your painting look a lot more interesting. And I think I'll finish this off by just adding a few little birds in the sky. Very simple. Just pick up the little round brush here and just do this. They're kind of just little V's in the sky. That's the way I see it. And you know, some of these bits are already here because when I was playing around with the paintbrush, sort of splattering the paint everywhere, I accidentally got some into the sky. Normally I like to sort of cover up that area, but you can turn those into things as well. You just got to work with what's on the paper and what's dried. You can correct it to a degree, but I find it's more fun just to try to turn it into something and work with it rather than get frustrated that it's not going exactly the way you wanted. So that's really it. That's a real simple sort of beach sketch kind of thing. I'm going to show you now how I would approach one that's a little bit like a darker scene. And give me a moment. Let's see, what have we got? Okay. So I'll bring up the other one. Let me just try change it around. Okay. So you should be able to definitely see this. So Kimberly's asked a question: do you use a micron pen? I have used them in the past, and I think those are actually pigment liners. And the difference between pigment liners and these ballpoint pens that I'm using, well, not really ballpoint, they're sort of ink-based pens, is they have just different tips. So these are the pigment liners I have, and they're kind of a similar design, I suppose, to the microns. They're just a different brand. And if you compare the tips, for example, for this one here, this is the uni ball pen that I'm using. It's got a ball point, it's got a roller point, and with this one here, the pigment liner, it's kind of got like a slight felt tip. It's really hard to see. I don't know if you can sort of see, but it's basically a softer tip, and I find that it's actually easier to draw on the paper when you're using these pigment liners, much like when you're using, you know, like a texture or something like that. I find there's less kind of friction, whereas if you're using these uni ball pens, tend to find sometimes if you've got kind of rough paper that it does get stuck in areas and is a little bit more challenging to work with. But I tend to use these ones a lot more now. I just prefer, I don't know, I just got used to using them, I suppose. I bought a big pack of them. But I do use these pigment liners as well. So really they're quite similar. I think the main thing, just try to get ones that have permanent ink, so they last forever. Alright. And you know, since I've got them out, I'll just demonstrate what they look like when I'm drawing with them. So let me just make this a little bit smaller. If I can just change that reference picture, it's just taking up too much room. Don't know if I can change it now. Oh, here we go. Shift that around a little bit. Okay, and so this one here, it's an really interesting scene. It's complicated. We've got this aurora landscape here. I'm going to simplify it down, and I've done a similar sort of watercolor tutorial in one of my classes with this in the past, but for this one here, I'll show you what it looks like in pen and wash. So there's so many different sizes of these pigment liners. This is the pack that I got a while ago. I think I got them almost 2 years ago, so use them really regularly. I'm going to stick with the 0.5, and these go from 0.05 up to 0.8. And you know, why do you need so many different sizes, you might ask? And you know, that's a good question. I basically use the 0.5, one of the smaller ones like the 0.1, and maybe the 0.8. And the reason why is because when you're drawing, especially a more complex scene, and you've got figures maybe in the foreground and you've got some figures in the background, the way you differentiate whether they're closer or further away, obviously, is by their size, but then also by the thickness of the pigment liner you're using. So if you're using a really thick pigment liner for something in the foreground, it just tends to bring it more forwards. So it's just another thing, another tool to imply depth and detail in your scene. So let's give this one a go. I've got a 0.5, and I think it's the 0.5. Actually, this is probably too big. I'm gonna stick with the have a look here. I think that's a 0.2. I'll go with this one. So let's just draw in the box. I don't know if I've got enough room actually even on this paper to get all 4 of these things that I'm planning to paint in. Let me just switch this light over a little bit. It's just a lot of glare. Okay, well, hopefully it looks a bit better when I start painting. I don't even need to complete the box, just something like that is fine. Again, when we're drawing in the scene, one of the things that I look at first is just where the horizon line finishes. So this one, we just look about halfway down and a bit more. So it's kind of about a third of the way down the page. And I'm going to draw that in like this. There. Quite a simple sort of thing there. And there's no figures in this scene. I think I want to add in a couple here on the side. And what we'll do, because you know they're obviously in the front, I'm just going to start drawing them in first and get them, maybe get a few details. Oops. Just maybe quite close to the front here. There's just a really quick indication of one, and we might do another one here as well. Maybe this leg, oops, there, one leg behind like that, so one forwards. Okay, main thing is you just got to try to get the proportions right. I think they say the head should fit into the body 7.5 times, you know, generally speaking. So I'm going to go around this now. Let's try and get in a tiny bit of this water. Just coming in so around that there, and then it just disappears off into the distance like that. Kept that pretty light. And you know, we can now start putting in things like rocks. Here we've got a rock around about here. Little technique you can do to just imply tone with your pen is just do a bit of hatching like that. So you're just basically drawing a bunch of lines in one direction. And your cross hatching is when you draw you know, a separate set of lines going in the opposite direction. That just makes it darker. And we can go ahead and add in this headland in the back and go ahead and just generally follow the reference photo. Sometimes I like when things don't turn out the way I intended, because it ends up looking a bit different and more unique. You know, I might, for example, say if I'd started here and I started a little bit too early, we could turn that into, you know, another bit of rock or something out here. So never get too worried if when you're drawing and things just don't, you know, especially with landscapes where you've got a lot more leeway, especially, you know, with natural shapes and things like that. They occur in all different sizes, all different shapes and forms, so there's no kind of right and wrong way. When you're doing a very realistic portrait, that's a different story. It can be quite difficult, you know, to get in all those little details, and you have to focus a bit more. Okay, and let me get started with this one. Let me just turn down this light. Sorry, it's really, I hope it's okay for you guys. So let's see what else I want to put in here. A few more rocks. Keep getting distracted by the computer being around. Okay, but if you have questions, just drop them in and I'll do my best to answer them, even if this stream finishes. So just playing around with some of these rocks and shapes and things here on the shore. Could be anything. They could just be even small bits of seaweed and things like that. just have a bit of fun drawing in and changing things around. The more you sort of play around and basically draw in these little shapes, the more comfortable you become and practicing your drawing skills, and it just becomes a lot easier. You don't have to think about it as much later on. So it's just a process essentially of reducing down a lot of these shapes into, a lot of these landmarks, into really basic shapes. So I think I'm going to stick with this. Let's go ahead and get started. So again, I'm going to start with the sky. And I'm going to pick up, let's have a look here. This is an interesting sort of one because we've got a kind of sunset here in the background. I'm going to pick up a bit of orange and just drop that in here. Let's have a look to see what that feels like. Okay, no worries. And then we can grab a bit of the yellow as well. Drop that yellow down the bottom, just so that there's a bit of a change in color from yellow to orange. Let that kind of fade in, blend with everything. Now we want to get in all these dark colors while that wash is still wet. So I'm just going up into the sky now. I picked up some indigo. I've got a bit of what is this, ultramarine, I think, or it could be cobalt blue. But just going through and getting that sky in and letting it blend with that bottom section, that sort of sunset there. Really important so that it just, there's a bit of a gradient. Okay. Another thing I like to do is you can just pick up a bit of that blue, or you can pick a bit of purple or something like that, blue or purple, with the smaller round brush, and just get in little sections like this, just implying some clouds running through. And there you can get some larger shapes, larger cloud shapes like that. There, and you can do this everywhere. Oops, that's too much. Okay, and through the top of the sky, that's where you just want to make it pretty dark. I'm going to pick up some indigo, drop that straight into the top section like this. A lot of the time I pick up paint almost straight from the palette when we're talking about, the really dark areas. I don't fiddle around with adding any water into it. Often my brush has enough water and the paints I use are pre-wet anyway, so I can just go straight in and drop that in, knowing that it will be fine. So remember, this is all going to dry off a lot darker than what it actually looks. So you need to compensate for that and essentially darken it down a bit more. Okay. This wet on wet kind of work. I'm going to leave that. I'm happy with how that sky looks, and I'll carry on down the page. Now, what I want to do is around here where we've got the edge of the water, I just want to mimic the sky. So I'm picking up a little bit of this orange mixed with yellow. Drop that in here, like that, so that it forms a little kind of sharper edge, like that. There. And we can also pick up a bit of neutral tint to just strengthen the horizon line a bit. Okay, let that sort of blend in, but it's important to have a bit of that orange warmth kind of in the water, just to reflect off the sky. Okay, and as we move down, just pick up a bit of blue paint and drop that in. Tiny bit of blue, or a cooler color is fine. And I also like to just leave little bits of white on the paper too, so things like that, that's fine. Just make sure this is dark enough and there's enough sort of blue in here while things are still wet. As I say just drop in some more paint and you can alter that tone. So coming down to the foreground, I'm going to be picking up a bit of burnt sienna, tiny bit of burnt sienna, just mix that in with the yellow ochre. Just drop that in and let's see how that looks. Maybe a bit of yellow paint in here as well. But essentially I'm going to use a slightly warmer mix for the ground. We'll go and just leave the water, maybe some little bits and pieces here, little bits of white that we can leave on. And move along the page. You know, what I like to do is just add a bit more darkness near the front as well. That helps to just bring the foreground forward, if that makes sense. Gives it a bit more depth. There we go. And you know, kind of think to myself, what else can I do? What else can I add in here? You know, do I need to add anything in here? So I think what we can do is maybe get in some little lines like this, running across like that. Just I might use a smaller round brush. That there, just almost directional lines. Like that, just in areas, and they also can be bits of rock and sand. Who knows? But also, this is, for me, it's also implying a little bit of shadow running towards the right hand side for some of these rocks. So I'm going to just darken down these rocks here as well, the ones in the water. Just make sure that they are darker than the actual water. Don't have to be too dark, but that's fine. And you know, we'll just colour these ones in. If you really want, you can leave a bit of yellow or a bit of light on the left side of the rocks. You can wait till later as well and just put some gouache in. Different ways to do things. Okay, and that looks okay. Just put in a bit of colour for these rocks in the background for the headland. So I'm using a bit of purple and a bit of neutral tint just mixed together, especially in areas where I have this sort of warmth of the sky showing through. Having a bit of coolness right next to it helps just contrast a bit better. I would actually prefer to use a smaller brush, smaller flat brush. Okay, drop that in. That, carry that all the way through, and cut around these figures as well, like this. There we go. You can also just darken it down if you feel like there's not enough strength there in these rocks in the background. Just go ahead and add some more paint in there. You kind of, after doing this for a while, you kind of get a feel and you can predict how things will dry off, whether it's going to look too weak, whether it needs a bit more warmth in it, stuff like that. You just tend to be able to pick that up a bit better. But if you're ever noticing through your painting, hey, you know, that's probably not the right tone, just try to get it early and mix in some darker colors in there, especially if we're looking at sort of these loose shapes. I find that just look better when you do them. Just go this wet on wet work. Okay, so that's it for the background. I'm happy with how that looks. And now we just want to add in some color for the figures. So I'll go with some orange for this one, just a warmer color like that, something like that. And for the other one, we'll go maybe with some yellow, like that. And we'll maybe drop in some blue as well at the base, and that. And for the legs, you know, I like to just pick up a darker color, just a bit of neutral tint. Drop that straight in. So I try to do these legs with only a few strokes, because the more you touch them, I find the more they start to take too much attention. So just a little, and this one kind of at the back. This leg needs to be a lot longer. Okay. And you know, we can go in and get some sort of shadows also running, sort of running in this direction, following that light source. That. There, join them onto the legs. Okay. And you know, little bits of, you know, some dry brush strokes here and there if you want. Some texture things in the foreground. But apart from that, that's really all you need to do for this little sketch. Add a bit of color to their heads. Okay. Well, that should do it. So we'll give it a quick dry off. Okay, so I've got a couple more sketches I want to do. Let's see how we go with this next one. Maybe being a bit too ambitious, trying to get through. Okay, I don't know what happened to the audio there. I think the camera just bugged out, but hopefully you can hear. Hopefully you can hear me now. It'll get better. I think I just need a bit more practice using the software. Okay. So I'm going to do this last bit pretty quickly. I feel like this one's getting overworked already, but I'll just start putting in a little bit of darkness underneath the area. So just around here, I'm going a bit of darkness, but I'm leaving out the right hand side of these buildings just to imply the light coming in. So just a bit of this like that. I think that's going to be enough. Some of these buildings closer to the ground, I'm just going to darken them off. And let's have a look here. This section, really of the entire cathedral is going to be in darkness, and just implying some little shadows on there, but keeping that light reflecting off the top part. Adam, so my mate Adam. I don't know. I've got another picture of Murano, actually, just an area in Venice, and I think I might do that one, but we'll see. Yeah, we'll see how we go for time as well. I think I've been spending too much time on this one, and I need to get something to eat. All right. What was I up to? Okay, I'm gonna put in a bit of green. Put in a bit of green for this tree here, and what we're going to do is just leave that bit essentially a darker color. So pop in a bit of darkness on the rooftops of these ones, like that, and a bit of darkness here. Mac is two for one. Okay. Let's continue on. What I'm going to do is just like darken off these a bit more at the front. And final touches, just some sharper kind of shadows and reflections. So especially underneath the boats, just a little bit of this going on helps. And it's really good practice as well, because you don't want to leave it until you're starting a proper painting to start practicing some of these shadows and getting more confident with your brush strokes. I use my arm as well. I just move my entire arm to just get these sort of strokes in. You just be careful in terms of, some people hold their brushes just with their fingertips and try to do this kind of thing, but it really restricts the movement and makes it a lot harder for you to get in those broader strokes. So I think we'll leave that. I'm happy with how this one looks. Okay, and fourth one. I don't know what I'll do. I do have this little photo prepared last Yeah, it's really weird. The audio just cuts out, and I've got to remove it, add it back on. So that's all right. It's good that I sort of find these things out early on, because I need to figure out what's the issue. Yeah, a little bit weird. Okay. Okay, we'll do the last one and see how we go. Hopefully the audio hasn't cut out again. I'm going to actually figure out what's the issue. Okay. So hopefully you guys can see the reference up there on the screen, and I'm going to just go in and really look at where the buildings finish off. So say it sort of finish off around about here. So oops, just draw in a general line where they finish off, and you know, it's actually a kind of path that goes in, because we'll go up like that for the side of this building on the right. Then you've got this kind of path that goes around to the edge and then straight in like this. So we've got some boats as well in this area. Let me just pop in a bit of a boat like shape here. Okay, and another boat here. Like that. And I might just change this one around and just make it more kind of similar to that one over there actually. There we go. So we've got 3 boats here. Another thing I want to do is add some figures, maybe a couple of figures here as well. So it's not too high up the head, but around about here. Another leg here. Oops. Add in another figure here, sort of standing by the side. We get maybe a bit of a shadow even running across. And I'm gonna figure out. We have to figure out the portions of these buildings as well. So it's mainly where this one ends off, around about here, just to give the other one enough room in the corner. And draw that side of the building like that. And rooftop in like that. And this side of the building is all pretty much going to be in darkness. We've got a little window here as well. Let me just check the chats. Favorite areas of Italy? I don't know. I've been to all the touristy sort of spots. So I tend to pick all these reference pictures of Venice, because I don't know. You tend to, when you go on holidays and you see pictures of places and you think, wow, that would be amazing if I go there. Often you head to that place and it's actually less than what you expected. But when I went to Venice, I thought it was just amazing, magical atmosphere. Well, there was a couple years ago that I went anyway, and just the history of it, and how the city was built on these wooden stilts, and it's just a magical sort of place. And you know, to me, when I got there, you know, what I expected was what I actually saw. So I don't know, I just sort of fell in love with that. And I guess that's why I sort of keep getting drawn back to these kind of scenes. And I also really like the architecture of the area as well. So I have this kind of obsession with painting and drawing buildings, and I find just the architecture there is really beautiful. And there's so many people sort of walking around. There's a lot of water as well, so kind of is everything that I like painting. And yeah, short answer, I guess, maybe long answer. So with this building here, I'm going to separate this out because if you look at it, there's basically 3 floors. So I'm going to go here, 1, 2, 3. That's the simple way to do it, just separate it out into these 3 floors. And pop on the windows, so this makes it easier so you don't make them too high or too low. Done another tutorial, post another tutorial of a similar sort of scene, actually Murano. Just colour in these windows in the middle, a bit darker, like that. Okay, and a little bit here. These shutters on the side. Okay. Like that. What are you cooking? Okay. Oh, it's just one thing after another. I think the streams I think the stream's a bit funny. Well, look, I'll just continue on. Anyway. YouTube's giving me some error saying that there's sort of like a video streaming buffering issue, but yeah, we'll see how we go. It's getting dark. Okay. Alright, I think we're going to get started with the painting now. I don't want to spend all too long on this one. I've been pretty quick with it. Also trying to just sort out what's going on with the computer. But okay, so I'm going to start off with a bit of cerulean blue in the sky. Just like that, just cutting around the buildings there, and really just using a really large mop brush here. And as we get into the water, as well, because I want to just do this all at the same time. Just going to a little bit of yellow, tiny bit of yellow ochre into the blue, just to get in this water at the same time. That, drop that in. Okay, maybe darker, the front, this. Alright, and for the buildings, I'm just going to go in and add in a lot of warmer colors. We've got this lots of warmth in here. Maybe a flat brush will do the trick. So some yellow, have a bit of fun around here and mix some of these colors together. If they end up going into the sky as well, don't worry too much. Bit of orange here, and I'm going to leave that bit of it to mix in. That top of this building, just some yellow ochre, light wash of yellow ochre. Okay. Building here to the left, we're going to get that a fair bit darker, but before we do that, I'm just going into these buildings on the right hand side to just get a really light wash of color running through them there. And the path especially, just want to keep that pretty light, just using some yellow, some little bit of lemon yellow, like that. Water it down here, and just bring that across the path. This area here, I'm just going to get in darker later on with a bit of a shadow, and we'll see where that sort of takes it. Now for the building just over to the left, I'm going to start off with a little bit of blue here. Okay, to the side. Drop that in like that, and maybe some purple, a little bit of purple through this mix. But the right hand side needs to be a little bit darker, which I'll get in later on. Also pop in some colors for the boats. Just going to pick up some of this, a little bit of this blue, bit of cobalt blue. Drop that in to the base of the boat, like that. And then leave some of this stuff in the boat actually just reflected off by the sunlight. And we can go in and just do the same thing for these other ones as well. And maybe some lighter blue for that one, and you know, a little bit, maybe a bit of orange or yellow or something for this one too, like that. And that should do the trick. Now, I'm thinking this side of the building here, I'm going to get that all in just with some indigo paint, and drop that in. Going to let that kind of melt